I was talking to the head of organizing for a very large organization. Everyone would know the name of this group. Head of organizing, he said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. So this is a nonprofit
Yeah.
saying protecting their brand was more important than empowering their members. And one of the groups I coached it for its first 7 years, Citizens Climate Lobby. The year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials published. So one group's saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization.
Yeah.
The other group's saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right?
This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and my guest is Sam Daley-Harris. Sam Daley-Harris founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results in 1980, co-founded Microcredit Summit Campaign in 1995, and founded the organization Civic Courage in 2012 to empower citizen action. He is the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. Would you hold that up a minute and tell me if I got the subtitle correct? I believe I
That's
did.
right. Yes.
And this is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and I am Frank Schaeffer, as you may have guessed. And I'm going to ask you to please subscribe right now on YouTube and to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and to my Substack commentary page. It has to be said at frankschaeffer.com or whatever. I've spoken to David from Tilma, Alberta, and Faith Hill of The Atlantic and asked them this question. And I'm going to ask you this to start with. What is the role of the media in an age of information overload? So the reason I'm asking you that is because you have been pitching your anti-poverty projects for a long time. And my guess is, besides all the who's who list of political leaders, with a picture of you and President Clinton up there on the wall, and many others you could have posted, and some of whom you talk about in your book. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the media today on two fronts. One, we've got a media that seems to be collaborating more and more with the Trump administration in terms of firing people he doesn't like, reorganizing, and so forth. But also, since you did the first edition of your book, Reclaiming Democracy, which you have many editions of, and we're going to talk about why you keep updating it, which is a great and unusual thing. Obviously, in telling this story, the ground has shifted. Weirdly enough, my podcast here today, I am the media. You are the media. Ernie's the media, my producer, Ernie Gregg. And we often joke and just say, hey, we are the media, and the legacy media that we used to all scramble to get heard from, between the New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth, are less important by day because everybody's getting their information more this way. So talk about the media a minute, and then we'll go into the main topic of the conversation, which is your book, Reclaiming Democracy.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take another twist to your question, and I'm going to start with this story because my focus is on the public and the media, the citizens in the media, us in the media. I was talking to the head of organizing for a very large organization. Everyone would know the name of this group. Head of organizing, he said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. So this is a nonprofit saying protecting their brand was more important than empowering their members. And one of the groups I coached it for its first 7 years, Citizens Climate Lobby. The year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials published. So one group's saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. The other group's saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And give that to them. And as a result, 4,300 letters and op-eds, etc., published the year before COVID. I could say why the year before COVID matters in a moment. Let me say one other thing about media. I'm often asked this question. In your book, you promote people writing letters to the editor. who reads the newspaper anymore?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
letters to the editor matter anymore? And what I would say to them is, if you're a member of Congress from Minnesota or Idaho or Texas, and you're in DC, where do you look for the pulse of your community? Yeah, you
sure.
read the letters you get or the ones that are presented to you and the meetings you have, but you look back to the top blogger in town, or do
Yeah,
you look to the Houston Chronicle or whatever it is? So I think when we're wanting to influence elected officials, things like letters to the editor still matter. And let me finish with the last point. When people get a letter published, I always say, send it to the aide in Washington and follow up on the phone to make sure they saw it. And I
sure,
kind of
sure.
mean, don't just do a jig and take a nap after your letter is published.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm going to back off and start where we normally start, which is in a slightly different place, and that is with the book. So I read your book, and what I do when I read a book is I pull things out that I like to open with from different parts of the book, whether it's the end of the book or the middle or wherever. And I string together my own little opening, which I'm going to read out now from this incredible book, Reclaiming Our Democracy. But before I do that, Sam, I want you to do one more thing. Um, and I want my listeners and viewers to understand that this is a very unusual book in that it has been routinely updated. So, first, two things talk about the genesis of the project and then why you keep updating it and how many versions it's been through. The last one was published, I think, in 2023, was it?
Well, 2024 hardback and 25 the paperback.
Okay, so and the first one came out when?
1993, 32 years ago.
Yeah, okay. So talk about that process. First of all, the first and then how you've updated and why you keep updating it. And I guess very broad strokes, or we'll take up the whole program on this. So very broad strokes, go through the sort of essential differences between the first iteration and the last. And then I'm going to get into my usual open and actually read from the book and get people into the text. It's an important book, Reclaiming Our Democracy. Unfortunately, a title that could have been ripped from the headlines, sadly, because we're in such flux right now between
Yeah.
a sort of an authoritarian system of government that's off the rails a little bit, and then what we would have thought of as American democracy, say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when you first did this project. So give me the evolution of the project, and then let's get into the book.
Okay, so starting with the project and then the book. So I use this thing called the story of self that
Yeah.
Marshall Gans of Harvard developed, and it basically asks, what happened in your life and what decisions did you make
Mhm.
that got you to this commitment? I'm going to tell mine, but every time I tell it, I ask listeners, think about your story of
Sure,
self.
sure.
What happened in your life? So here's mine. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music.
Yeah.
And then 45 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby. Results in I'm asked, music poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The
Hmm.
death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964 and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in
Yeah.
1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why
Hmm.
am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, it's now 1977, I'm
Hmm.
invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a
Hmm.
musician. I mean, it's inevitable in my mind because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? I'm thinking if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But
Yeah.
I go to this event, it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature,
Hmm.
people. We'll never get around to doing the things that can be done, but there's
Right.
one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my
Hmm.
question, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will
Yeah.
and hunger. So I asked 7,000 students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't
Mm.
want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, 200, fewer than 3% could
Yeah.
answer correctly. Over 97% could not tell me.
Sure.
And results grew out of that gap between the calls for the political will on one hand and the lack of basic information on who
Hmm.
represented us in Washington on the other.
Yeah.
So we start this thing. I'm a substitute teacher 5 days a week in the LA schools, starting this nonprofit lobby group. And it's kind of nose to the grindstone, really focused on that.
Hmm.
And we just kept doing our work. And the genesis of the book was a kind of people should know about this.
Yeah. And
People,
also generating a handbook for some of these guys you were talking to, I think. I mean, basically, because
yeah.
there's so much basic information in it as well as the stories which elucidate what you're trying to say. But at the beginning, were you developing it for the people you would talk to in person in terms of something to leave with them as a game plan, or was this aimed at a different audience?
Well, it was really aimed at anyone who was hungry for
Hmm.
what can I do to make a difference? Is
Yeah.
this it? Signing the petition, is that
So how
it?
many, how many, just so we don't lose track here, how many iterations has it been through from the first publication? How many times have you updated it and republished it?
Basically every 10 years.
All right. So
93,
there's three major editions,
uh,
and the
a
latest.
93, oh 03, 13, and 24.
Yeah. Okay. And then the latest 2025 version, if the only question I have is um, the specifics of the moment we're in, and then I want to get into the book because we're digressing a little bit. But the specifics of this moment is that we have cut foreign aid, we have cut the program to help with AIDS patients globally. We're doing the same thing domestically with Medicare, Medicaid, especially Medicaid. It seems to me that one difference between the first iteration of your book and the present tense, as in right now, this moment we are talking, is that the US government as an officially has turned against the policies that you have been advocating. We have now turned our back on
Yes,
the global community in a way that is
yes,
unprecedented. I'm
yes.
73 and I've never seen anything like this in my life. In other words, I think the difference between this administration and the past is that there may have been tremendous hypocrisy in, for instance, the Nixon administration or whatever you want to name, but at least there was hypocrisy. There was a kind of a genuflection toward virtue, and a pretense of course, we're all for world aid, we're all for doing these things. Now, even the husk of hypocrisy has been stripped away. There's no need even to pretend anymore. We're interested in the program that you lay out. So it seems to me that you're asking people to be advocates at a moment when there are more closed doors than certainly any time in my life
Yeah,
in terms of the things you are for. I
yeah.
don't want to be over dramatic about that. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, unpacking the question you just asked, there's so much to it. Let me start with this. We started lobbying Results, the anti-poverty lobby, in 1984
Yeah.
on these issues, and every year since then.
Yeah.
And at the time, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, reported 40,000 children around the world were dying every day from malnutrition and preventable disease, things like
Yeah.
measles,
Yeah.
coupled with malnutrition. Over the last 41 years, the global child death rate has fallen by 66%.
Yes.
For some 40,000 a day to 13,125 a
Sure. It's
day.
been moving in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people might know of the Nick Kristof column around Christmas where he says, things are going better in the world than we think. And that's one
Sure.
example. Well, enter Rubio, Trump, Musk. I should probably lead with Musk, actually. And the global child death rate is likely to tick up
Sure. Of
for the
course.
first time in 41 years. So that's the kind of the background. But let me give one piece of good news, and we'll see in an avalanche of horrible news. In late July,
Mm.
the House Appropriations Committee passed its bill in committee
Yeah.
for the State Department and foreign assistance.
Yeah.
It basically rejected Trump's deep cuts on global health. I'll give you two examples.
Yeah,
This year, uh, uh, pending some bucking the rule of law, maternal and child health is funded at $915 million. Maternal and child health. Like
sure.
that's part of what is saving 10 million kids' lives a year
Yeah,
compared to the early 80s. President Trump called for a cut from 915 to 85
yeah,
million. The House committee last week approved 915,
yeah,
not Trump's 85. Let me give you one quick other one. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, with
sure.
PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Fund for AIDS in Africa, have saved 65 million lives since 2002. Where do you read in the news 65 million lives saved, in this case, since 2002? Well, again, last year it was funded at 1.65 billion. President Trump called for 800 million for next year's budget, and the House Appropriations Committee agreed to 1.5 billion, not Trump's 800
Yeah,
million.
so there are some points, glimmers in there, but the general direction, certainly coming from the White House administration,
Big time.
is in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
Okay, now we're going to back up here, and I'm going to put together this little introduction I made to your book. Again, taken from different parts of your book, but I'm going to run these little segments together as an intro. And the book is Reclaiming Our Democracy. It's a very important book. And we, of course, will put links to everything to do with Sam and his work. But for the moment, let me just read some excerpts from the book that I put together, not in any order they appear in the book, but as I would do it if I was writing the back cover. For the 2024 election edition, it has been an extraordinary experience completing this edition of Reclaiming Our Democracy while seeing a yearning for the ideas in the book emerge in the United States and around the world. And we've been talking about that yearning. I mean, the context we are in makes this book more necessary than ever. Engaging in transformational advocacy is a tall order, but what is at stake is the quality of life on this planet and perhaps life itself. Now, 30 years ago, I would have said, okay, Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb. It turned out not to be true. In fact, populations are declining. It's easy to have a lot of kind of overblown statements. But in this particular case, I'm going to reread that. Engaging in transformational advocacy is a tall order, but what is at stake is the quality of life on this planet and perhaps life itself. In the context of the Trump administration and the direction of both environmental and poverty issues globally, that is not an extreme statement. Futurist and inventor, this is the next quote, Buckminster Fuller, a hero of mine, was famous for saying, quote, "I am an average human being," end quote. Can you describe yourself the way Fuller does, as a, quote, average human being? In his foreword to Susan E. Gibson's book, How to Be an Amazing Volunteer Overseas, Nobel Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus writes, quote, "People who change the world are not necessarily special people. They are everyday people who do not hesitate to respond to outside signals," end quote. Are you an everyday person who will respond to outside signals? And remember, I'm reading from Rediscovering Our Democracy. These are all quotes from the book. Are you an everyday person who will respond to outside signals? The stories of transformational advocacy throughout this book, maybe there is an issue that has moved you, gun violence or poverty or climate change, but you can't see a path to making a difference. Maybe this book is your outside signal. Remember, it's never too late to engage. It's never too late to make a difference. And that's kind of, the not summary of the book, but it's the way I would kind of lead into it, having read it and pulled those quotes out as a way to kind of introduce the overall concept of why you've written this book. It's directed to, quote, ordinary people who turn out to be extraordinary. And it's directed, therefore, to everybody who is listening to me now. And I would urge you to read the book as a kind of a how-to. You're not going to be able to do everything that the book suggests, but you will be able to do more because you have read the book. That's the best I can say it. So with that, let me ask you to summarize it. Now, I have all the chapter headings listed here. And the only other thing I would add is something you wrote But the messy, complicated reality is far more compelling. In my many years leading and coaching citizen advocates, I've seen how powerful it is when we lead with our vulnerability and authenticity. So I would leave it there and I would throw it back to you and just say, if you were trying to describe the need to people and why they should read it, how would you pitch it? I pitched it by reading some quotes from the book. How would you pitch it?
Yeah, let me say it a couple ways. I'm reading, sorry, a book right now by Shannon Watts, who wrote, the book is called Fired Up, and she founded Moms Demand Action, the gun safety organization.
Right.
And in her book, it's she's talking about living on fire,
Mm,
as in kind of like some other way. And so, one way I would describe the book is it's really talks about transformational advocacy. We can get into in a moment, which allows people to come off the sidelines and live on fire in the best sense of that word. Um, yeah, it's like I think everyone wants to make a difference, wants to leave the campsite cleaner than we found it. But
right.
the how with this avalanche of news and nonsense that we're bombarded with makes it difficult to do that. And if I can say one other thing, there was a study by the Congressional Management Foundation. They asked nonprofit grassroots staff what their primary tactic was. And 78% said an email form letter was their primary tactic. Give me your name and your zip code and we'll send a letter for you. 78% said an email form letter was their primary tactic, but only 3% of congressional staff said an email form letter was highly effective.
Sure.
So we're bombarded by these not very effective actions to take.
Mm,
And transformational advocacy, maybe I'll describe it right quickly. Transactional advocacy is sign the petition,
sure.
transaction complete. But with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those things that you thought you couldn't do, you see yourself differently.
Yeah,
That's the
and by the way, I just want to
transformation.
tell people that there are stories in your book that illustrate all these points. I'm not going to those stories because retelling a story of a story is not the way to draw people into your conversation.
Yeah,
And I'm sort of going to the points. But
yeah,
having said that, within the book itself, the stories of people and how they have done some of the things you're talking about are incredibly engaging and good reading and well written. So I just want to add that. Keep
right.
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. So I think that's it on that for now. But people, I mean, let me say it one other way. I was at a dinner on July 4th and then a beach party on July 5th. In both cases, one of the couples, the husband or wife, was seeking citizenship in another country.
Yeah.
I mean, the desperation or the like desire for some escape route
Hmm.
is painful,
It is
actually.
painful.
And I know another fellow, and I'll just tell this quick story. He founded Search for Common Ground. His name is John Marks. And
Hmm.
after he retired from Search for Common Ground, he and his wife retired in the Netherlands. After the election, they moved back to the States because they wanted to be part of the action. Well,
Yes.
not everyone feels they have the tools or the ability to be part of the action.
Yeah.
So the books is really
I
about
have a favor to ask you. You've got that hard copy there. Just hold it up again for a second. And I was going to ask you to read the preface to the latest edition from why this book and down to where you say your name, Sam Daley-Harris, October 2023, because I think I've been setting it up, but the preface itself both tells your story and it needs retelling, but also just why you wrote the book. Would you mind just reading that out to us? Because
Sure.
I want to share it with people, and I think you reading it is more effective than me reading
Okay,
it.
great. When I wrote the first edition of this book in 1994, Results, the nonprofit citizens lobby I founded, was 14 years old, and we had amassed an impressive, if largely unknown, record of success. Our mission was to create the political will to end hunger and the worst aspects of poverty and break through the thought, I don't make a difference. We did this primarily by lobbying governments and the media to support funding for cost-effective programs that had demonstrated real-world results. We had no fancy offices on K Street in the nation's capital. In fact, we had no paid lobbyists on staff. What we did have was a lean, passionate staff who supported and trained thousands of ordinary people around the world to become grassroots citizen spokespeople on our issues using a replicable set of methodologies that were consistently delivering legislative successes. In this book, I will lay out a unique form of advocacy, advocacy that I will describe in the pages that follow as transformational advocacy. In 2012, I launched Civic Courage because I felt called to share the principles and methods originated by Results with other grassroots advocacy groups. In the years since, I've been thrilled to see Results' principles and methodologies successfully implemented by groups like Citizens Climate Lobby, Friends Committee on National Legislation, Catholic Relief Services, and others. But I have also been disheartened by the reluctance shown by so many other advocacy groups when offered the opportunity to inspire their members to move from just being names on a mailing list to becoming the motivated, empowered volunteer advocates that healthy democracies so desperately need. The book you're holding has been radically revised, updated, and expanded to meet the moment. My motivation for sharing its message has also evolved. That is because the challenges our democracy faced have worsened, and has the depth of our discouragement. As I was completing this preface, I read an article by Alabama media group political commentator Kyle Whitmore about yet another spate of gun violence. Under the title, What Reason Have We Given Our Children to Love America? Whitmore expressed the powerlessness and futility felt by most Americans when it comes to our ability to change government policy. Quote, I don't think I ever really wanted to hurt anyone before, but when my son told me where his hiding place was in his classroom, for a second, I wanted to hurt everyone. Such is the feeling when you realize the world doesn't care about the safety of your child. Such is the futility of that anger when you know there's nothing you can do personally and
Yeah,
nothing anyone else will do collectively.
yeah,
End of quote.
yeah.
This is the powerlessness I seek to address in this book, not by focusing on how deep the cynicism runs or how damaging it is to our well being, but by answer these two questions. What can I do to be a real change maker, and how can we do it? This book will lay out a proven, replicable way to make a difference and heal our democracy in the process. It's not the only solution needed, but it's one fundamental missing piece: citizens awakening to their power. I want this book to be a beacon of hope and possibility for people who feel brokenhearted and overwhelmed by the headlines they read. I
Mm.
intend this book to be a roadmap for individuals and organizations that want to make a difference on the issues that are precious to them. And I want this book to be a wake-up call, a clear challenge to the very large, well-funded national nonprofit organizations that I believe are guilty of anemic advocacy that
Mm.
disempowers the average citizen.
Mm.
In this edition, I revisit the story of Results' founding and its first decade of advocacy so that those unfamiliar with our work can learn about what we do and how we do it. And I share this narrative to challenge much of the conventional wisdom about advocacy and the false assumptions about what ordinary citizens are capable of in a democracy. I am sure that we are not only capable of so much more as active citizens, but we are, in fact, hungry for it.
Yeah, and I really love the preface, by the way, but also just tell people again that this is a book that Ernie, Greg, my producer, and I really believe in. We have a book club called It Has to Be Read, and we would like to make your book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, the offering for October. So
Wow.
that way we can re-promote and tie you in and so forth. So this will be our October book club. It Has to Be Read offering, um, reclaiming our democracy. And one thing that I want to talk about here that is a sort of a theme in your book that I think is important when you talk about making the big ask, making big ask is part of moving out of your comfort zone. People have warned me against urging people to move out of their comfort zones. Who would want to do that? They've said, won't you scare people off? It might, but that doesn't alter the power that can come from making big asks, accepting the invitation and moving out of your comfort zone. Now, again, that's not one of the stories in the book, but philosophically, I'd like to just talk about making the big ask. That applies to a lot of areas of life. How do you define that? And give me some examples of where this has
Yeah.
worked for you.
Okay, great. I'll give you one from a week ago. But so it's a longer story, but I'll simplify it that when we're starting a chapter,
Yeah.
and I've just started coaching in January 2025, the United Church of Christ Climate Hope Affiliates, for example,
Yes. Yeah.
launched their first chapter in March. They have 8 now in the middle of 2025. The thing is, when they're launching a chapter, the big ask is, well, of course, join the chapter, but we're going to start with a 4-part new group training every week for 4 weeks or
Yeah.
every other week for 8 weeks, 90 minutes, 4 times. So that's a big ask. I mean, people are, let's say they're 20 in the room and you're looking for people to raise their hand. And they're raising their hand to start with a 4-part new group training. That's a big ask.
Yeah.
And most organizations aren't willing to make it.
Yeah.
So that's why this is a
And that's
small
one of the
ask.
mistakes. That's one of the mistakes you point to.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And so, for example, last week, really recently, one of the volunteers, a pastor in Oakland, California,
Yeah.
they have a monthly webinar with guest speakers, Q&A, and there's another thing called the Grassroots Victory, where one of the volunteers talks about a victory they had, but they include the struggle.
Sure.
It wasn't just a celebration. No, they had to get through some
Yeah.
struggle. And very, very recently, the pastor from this church in Oakland, California, Reverend Lori Manning, she talked about uh, getting a call that they had a meeting with their Senate aide in 72 hours and
Yeah.
how she panicked at first. But the training in the 4-part new group training set them up to succeed. And she does this wonderful grassroots victory that I've shaped into an op-ed piece that was published in the Democracy newsletter, The Fulcrum,
Yeah.
the name of the newsletter. But so because the organizer made the big ask, we're going to start with a 4-part new group training. When she got 72 hours notice, and she'd only been in the chapter 2 or 3 months,
Sure.
they could pull it off,
He was
not with a
prepared.
little
Yeah.
kind of knees knocking and nervousness, but it was not like thrown into the deep end without any
Yeah.
swimming
Yeah.
lessons.
I want to say again, Reclaiming Our Democracy is the offering in my book club, I should say Ernie's and or our organization's book club, whatever, for October. And just reintroducing the book and this conversation here. This is in conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and my guest is Sam Daley-Harris. And Sam has done a lot of stuff when it comes to organizing people to do good things on the side of the angels, if you can put it that way. And he's the author, most importantly, of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. And handbook full of stories and good writing. And if you heard him reading the preface a moment ago, you'll know that he can write and draw you in. So it's a good read. It's an easy read in the best sense of the word. Um, it's going to be our book club offering for October. Anyway, I would ask you to please subscribe right now on YouTube where you're watching this, or to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer on Apple, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and to my Substack page, It Has to Be Said, where I do a lot of commentaries. Um, and what I would say about this book is that I guess you can't claim this about many books. It's so topical that it has been updated 3 or 4 times over the last 30 years to bring it up to speed. And so essentially, when you are now kind of caught in the headlights of the Trump era saying, okay, what can I do about anything? Not only is this very topical, but it has been crafted for this moment. In other words, this book has been updated for right now. It isn't as if somehow this comes out of another era of America when things were, less fraught. It is addressed to this fraught era. If you are like me, and I have a commentary that I do, and some of my comments get a very wide hearing. But nevertheless, I find myself so overwhelmed by everything that's going on that I don't even know where to start. And so this book is for me, as much as it is for you. It is very much, okay, start here. Don't give up. Do this. And I would just ask you a basic philosophical question that I'm going to answer my way first, and then I want your opinion on it. It seems to me that one of the downsides of the sort of hysterical way of approaching this era is by saying, okay, Trump has destroyed our democracy. It's all over. The next election will be stolen. And sort of give up before we start, not realizing that also one thing we have in America is very strong institutions that are going to eventually push back. And we need to prepare for that moment by continuing our advocacy with hope for a future that is going to be more orderly, where we can still get something done again, whether it's gun lobby or world hunger or any of these things. So you must talk to a lot of people who feel somewhat the way I do when I'm saying, well, there's so much to comment on this week, I don't know where to begin. Rather than giving up, tell us why you might believe that it's worth continuing our advocacy in spite of the dark moment we are in, with a sort of a basic, you're old enough to have a view of history as well as the present. What do you feel is hopeful about this moment in terms of signs that it isn't all over just because of Donald Trump? He will not live forever. He will not be president forever. No matter what happens, his history will roll on. The pendulum will swing, and we have to be there when it does. That's my view. I wanted to ask you how you feel about that.
Well, let me answer in a couple of ways, because one of the things you're talking about, A, is the cynicism, and then
Yes.
B, what can I do kind of thing. So I'm going to do the cynicism first. I was interviewed on this national radio program, and I was so moved by the vulnerability of the host. This was question number two. The passive nature to our politics now, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career, and I feel beat down by it. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What's the way out of that? I was really moved that he was that blunt about it. The first thing I said
Yeah.
was Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, "We aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew." Well, are we? And if
Yeah.
we are, how does crew operate? This is dealing with the cynicism before we move on to the what to do, because you can't do anything if you're just hit buried by the cynicism. The
Sure.
second thing I said was Alex Steffen, futurist and climate activist, said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah. If I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things, I'm not going to do anything. Why
Sure.
would I if nothing I do makes a difference? So we have to like look that cynicism in the face and see if we're going to be senior to it. The other thing I want to say is when I'm talking to a group and I'm telling them what to look for, as now I say we need protests. It's not what I do, but we need protests.
Yes.
What I do is a relational thing. We need protests, but we also need people going inside.
Yes.
And that's the piece that I do. And what I say to people what to look for.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a group that's working to deliver transformational
Mm.
advocacy, three things. One, recruitment and community building. Recruitment, they bring new people in, not just to build an e-blast list,
Sure.
but to form local chapters so you're not working alone.
Yeah.
That's the recruitment. Community building is, for example, a monthly whole of organization webinar. I mentioned it before with guest speaker, Q&A, inspiration. Recruitment and community building. Two, training. How do you get the meeting with the elected? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? Two, training. Three,
Yeah.
the organization encourages breakthroughs. They encourage you to move out of your comfort zone
Mm.
because that's where you grow confidence. There's a drawing in the book with a small circle
Yes.
labeled your comfort zone. And next to it is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for an organization that doesn't kick you out, but encourages you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. And, that would be a basic part of a message for what to look for in terms of will this group feed me power?
Yeah,
That's
and
my
I
question.
would say to the cynic out there, I stick this up on your wall. Cynicism is obedience. If you don't like the Trump administration, every day that you are not doing what Sam is talking about is a day you are obeying Donald Trump and JD Vance and Tucker
Yes,
Carlson and these other
yes,
miscreants. And basically you're saying, okay, I'm sitting here mired in my cynicism to the point where I'm obeying them. And the little bright spot that you talked about where the House went against Trump in defunding some of the poverty programs, obviously some of those guys had sat down with some constituents and heard from other people because otherwise they wouldn't have done it. I mean,
that's right.
there's
Over
proof.
decades.
Yeah,
I mean,
someone has
now,
been meeting with them,
yes, yes. Now, the ones
including,
who are in
say,
right now, they've only been meeting with them for 10 or 20 years, the senior members of those committees.
yeah.
But it's been over decades.
Well, and they're still hearing from evangelical
Yeah,
pastors who would come in and say something like, "Hey, I voted for Donald Trump, but you can't do this
yeah,
because I was part of the program with President Bush, who was very conservative and nevertheless put together this thing because of Bono and other people who
yep,
advocated with him.
yep,
And, we saved millions of lives. And, how can you do this? This is going to give us a bad name. People are talking,
yeah,
even in the Trump camp, there
yeah.
are people who dissent against the inhumanity that has been part of the, should we call it, the Elon Musk program.
Yes, yes. Let me give your viewers and listeners a glimpse of what I do when I'm working with the group that's going to meet with the member of Congress who opposes their
Yeah.
bill. I
Yeah.
have them ask three questions. Question one, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? It's a
Mm.
question. And you're listening for assignments. I can tell a story about that in a moment. But what would it take to change your mind, too? Could you say more about that? Three, why do you think that is? It's basically a deep listening exercise.
Yeah.
And you're listening, among other things, for assignments, and you're listening as they go deeper to some place where you actually are connected. There's
Yeah.
this friend that was working to start a climate solutions caucus. And he was from Pennsylvania, but he went down to South Florida because of sea level rise, and there were Republicans and Democrats in that area of Florida. And he meets with a member of Congress who said, "What would it take to change your mind?" And
Mm.
the member said, "Well, if you could get the chambers of commerce on board." And he did. Miami Beach, Coral Gables, North Miami,
Yeah.
letters. He comes back with the letters. The congressman says, well, if you could get the mayors on board, looking for cover. And he came back with letters from the mayors
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Miami Beach. So you are listening for assignments and the like.
Yeah, no, I really love that. And of course, the book itself is structured in a way that some of the success stories of what people did and why they got involved with you are told and are very inspiring. We can't emphasize this enough because of the moment we're in. I think the cynicism, the story you tell of the person who had moved to Holland for retirement, not because they were fleeing the US, and then in this context said, no, I got to get back into it again. Forget retirement. I'm moving back because I have to be part of the fight, to try to hold on to enough of our democracy so that it can be reclaimed. And I
Yeah.
want to talk about that aspect. I mean, some of what we're doing now is we are in a holding pattern, um, where we have to remind people, and I find this very much as someone who's 73 at this point in my life with 5 grandchildren and 3 grown children, a lot of childcare with the kids who live across the street from me, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of what I need to do, and I'm very involved with their high school, and I do some speaking there and talk to a lot of people, is try to tell younger people, we call them Generation Z, whatever. Look, one thing that where you have been ill served by our educational system in the US is that we are a little bit ahistorical. And one of the ways you've been ill served is not understanding how desperate 99% of human history has been in terms of hunger, poverty, disease, warfare. And yet here we are, which means someone cared and someone didn't give up. This whole idea of the survival of the friendliest rather than the survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Okay, so you pass that on to young people. You're going to say, look, they had the Black Death, but they still fell in love, got married, and had children. World War II was going on, but someone was making love in an apartment that had been half bombed by the Nazis 20 minutes before, but life went on. And we need to pass that on. And I think your book is very instructive that way, in the sense that you're reclaiming our democracy out at a moment of cynicism and despair. And you're saying, the survival of the friendliest demands that this, above all moments, is when we don't give up. You have to be that offering of hope in the midst of all this.
Yeah.
So, that's what I think the book represents more almost than your text. It's just, if not now, when would you have a book called Reclaiming Democracy?
Yeah.
And that's really the way I feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me reference another book. Jamil Zaki is a professor at Stanford. I just love to say the title of his book. It's called Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness.
Yes.
In the book, he says, if you're cynical, it's like you're playing poker and you fold your hand before the game even starts.
Yeah.
And exactly. I say, if you're a civic cynic, it's like you fold your hand before the Congress is even sworn in, before the first bill is even introduced. And you talk about high school. I taught high school way 50 years ago for a long time. And of course, I asked those 7,000 students to name their member of Congress. They're all in their 60s now.
Sure.
Students kind of thing. But the whole notion that you bring a young person who's 15, 16, 17 into a congressional meeting.
Yes.
Where they've had some preparation. They're not just thrown in there. The attention turns to the young person.
Of course.
It's almost like, it's like the elected or their staff. There's acknowledgement of a certain BS, but they don't want the young person to think there's. So the young person is the most powerful person in the congressional meeting.
Yeah.
If they're invited in and if they're a little bit trained, so they're not, on flat-footed. But it's really, really important that.
Yeah, and I just think, again, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I just feel when you read about sort of Generation Z and some of their despair and the whole relationship with iPhones and all the rest of it, I really think, I mean, speaking as a grandparent who has done a lot of childcare for his 3 youngest grandchildren of 5, one of my gifts to them is, and I know this word is no longer fashionable for a lot of reasons, but is to give people a sense of normality. And that is that even this is normal. I grew up in Europe, right after World War II. The veterans I knew had fought at D-Day and fresh from the war in Korea. All these were world-ending events. Nuclear holocaust hung over us, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all the rest of it. I lived in apartheid South Africa for a year during the apartheid regime, where I was working for a bit. Um, I think young people need to be told by older people consistently, don't give up on love, don't give up on relationships, don't give up on life. Yes, the climate is a mess, but this doesn't mean, it's only going to improve if you live a humane and wonderful life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't just sit down and say, well, then I'm never getting married, never having a child. Why even bother dating? I've given up on the whole thing. Life does go on. So I think the gift of older people, such as myself, and I think speaking for you in reclaiming our democracy, is saying, look, not only does cynicism not pay, and then you become obedient to whatever the system is if you do nothing,
Yeah.
but it never did pay. I mean, we're only still here because
Yeah.
somebody cared when everything
Yeah.
seemed hopeless. And I think young people don't sense that, whereas you and me have lived long enough and the arc of our own lives has proved that to us because we're still here doing something useful. And I think we've both overcome things in our life that at the time might have seemed hopeless, but they,
Yeah.
they actually didn't turn out to be. And I really feel that's a really important thing to be talking about right now. As an older person, we're not that young person in the meeting that all eyes turn to, but maybe that young person is there because we've encouraged them to step up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let me throw three things out. Later in 2025, I'll be 79. So
You're
I'm
looking good, if I may say
little
so.
ahead of you. Number one. And number two, it's like it was as recently as this weekend, people talk about, I'm so discouraged. And I would say, well, imagine Nelson Mandela in year
Right.
25
Yeah.
of his 27 years in prison. Just can we find the Nelson Mandela in us kind of thing? And
Yeah.
the last thing I would say is we need to give the young people hope and encouragement. We also need to give them a couple of tools to
Yes.
kind of agency
Mm.
to wield and to demonstrate to themselves that they can have an impact. And I think that's another important ingredient.
Well, hopefully in October, when we've made this part of our Has to Be Read book club, we'll have some people who are working with younger people who will be able to use this book in those groups because I think it would be a good place to start to get the discussion going.
Yeah. Recently, in mid 2025, I spoke to a civic summit, and it was 60 high school and middle school civics teachers from around the US. And it
Yeah.
was frankly quite inspiring. We just need more of them, uh, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that basically the way the book breaks down in the table of contents, which I'm going to go to here, just take a look at. I just want to read off some of it here beside the preface that you heard when Sam read it to us. The possibility of transformational advocacy, transformational advocacy 2, it felt like a turning point. 3, I would be advocating for children, the children I worked with. 4, I felt I was part of something revolutionary. 5, this is exactly what we need to be doing. Part 2, the birth of results, finding your voices through transformational advocacy. 6, it was exhilarating exercise in getting our democracy back. 7, this was my run to democracy. 8, I was impressed that something concrete and massive could actually be done. Part 3, transformational advocacy in action. Chapter 9, getting high on life. Chapter 10, you can stop the editorials now. Chapter 11, and I have never been the same since. Chapter 12, it's refreshing to see people as possibilities rather than as obstacles. Chapter 13, to my great surprise, and so forth. So you can see from the chapter headings there that the tone of the book is one of possibility. And it's not kind of a Pollyannish, everything will be fine if you just sort of get involved. There are practical examples. It's a real how-to guide. So I want to ask you now, in the time we have remaining, to back away from the book for a minute, which will be our book club offering in October, and just speak philosophically for a minute as someone who's been around the block and seen some things. How would you explain this moment of American history to someone from another planet who had maybe not seen anything from us for 30 years. And so, their
Yeah.
idea of a crisis was
Let
Watergate,
me
Nixon
let me start
revival.
with
I mean,
this.
I'm going to put this another way. Sam, I'm going to ask you, who are we right now?
Well, I mean, a part of who we are is a group that, by and large, hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah.
Now, I learned that a long time ago when I asked 7,000 students the name of their member of Congress. They're not paying attention. But
Yeah.
when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, 100 million Americans didn't vote. And when
Yeah.
Joe Biden was elected in 2020, it was the largest voter turnout by percentage in 125 years, and 80 million didn't vote. So part of who we are
Hmm.
is a people, and you might say, well, you're reading the news all the time, blah blah. That's who we are, is a people who doesn't pay attention much.
Yeah.
That's part of what you're looking for is an organization, recruitment and community building, bringing new people in,
Yeah.
waking people up, helping them pay attention. So, this is a moment of, this is what you get when too many aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And all I can do is A, pay attention, and B, encourage more and more and more people to pay attention themselves through this conversation.
Do you think
And
not
other.
paying attention is the price we pay for a certain level of prosperity that has been unknown in human
Oh, big
history?
time. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
talk about that. How does that work?
Well, I mean, I think it's also been true through time that that somehow the who am I, why am I here, what's my purpose has not been the top of mind question
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so I think it's been every society's the quest or avoidance to
Yeah.
discover who are we and why are we here and what are we here to do and what's our purpose. And it's especially important now that you
Mm.
know living off of trivia uh, is uh, insufficient for our
Yeah.
lives
Yeah.
and for this time.
Yeah. Living
And
off of
more
trivia
people,
is insufficient. That's the understatement of the millennium. Living off
exactly.
trivia is insufficient. I love that. Hold your book up again, please, and give us the title and the subtitle. Um,
Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. I don't know if I have time to tell about the
please
subtitle.
do.
The
We're
original
not bound by
subtitle
any.
was Reclaiming Our Democracy, Healing the Break Between People and Government.
Yeah, I love that.
And then I read the work of Hari Hahn, a
Mm,
professor at Johns Hopkins, who talked about transactional organizing,
mm,
transactional mobilizing, and transformational organizing, which a bit spoke to what the staff did. So I took her language and I changed it to transactional advocacy and
yeah,
transformational advocacy,
yeah,
which is more what the volunteers do.
yeah,
And quite honestly, it was since the previous edition was that I learned this is what we're doing. We're doing transformational advocacy.
yeah.
And I didn't have that name for it until this most recent edition.
Well, it's very appropriate for the moment we're in. Um, I'm going to ask you a favor here. In a moment, I will sign off, but please you stay on and talk to my producer, Ernie Gregg, for two reasons. First of all, because we're making your book a book club selection, we want to make sure that we put all the links to you wherever this goes so that we can promote what you're doing and also promote the book better in October. Secondly, you know a lot of people. We're always looking for a guest to talk to that we've not thought of.
Okay.
And so I would very much appreciate you taking a moment and talking to Ernie about people we should be talking to that we
Right.
might not be thinking of.
Yeah.
They don't have to be famous, they don't have to have a book. We're
Yeah.
just interested in talking to the people who can help us and the people who listen to us do the things that need to be done to
Right.
survive and prosper and move ahead and become informed and so forth and so on. We have a big range of guests that we talk to, as you know, if you've looked at some of our recent guest lists, but a lot of those guests come to us because you, Sam, or someone like you says, "Hey, listen, have you thought of so and so?" And puts us in touch with them, and maybe even introduces Ernie to them or whatever it may be. So will
Yeah,
you do that?
I will.
Good. All
Yeah.
right. The book is Reclaiming Our Democracy. It's in our book club offering in October. It has to be read. And Sam, I really thank you. I thank you for the book and also just for your life of advocacy. I'm glad you did that meeting with those 7,000 high school students and decided to change your life and get more involved. And help us get through this moment in history. So thanks for pushing back against the cynicism.
Yeah, thanks. And it's been an honor talking
Hey,
with you.
this is just great. I love it. And I'm so glad we're doing the book club because we want to see more of you and we'll find excuses to keep talking and give Ernie some good names. And all the best with the book. We'll do everything we can to push the fourth or the fifth edition, wherever we're at now, into as many hands as possible. Thanks so much,
Okay.
Sam.
Thank
Okay.
you.